Hi there. Welcome to Games Over Coffee Consulting. Today we're talking about a game called Lone Tower from Genetix Studio, or GX Studio. I don't really know what name the developer prefers. Thank you so much for submitting this game. I played it on my phone. It is a mobile game. The game is called Lone Tower, and as you can see right here, this is the gameplay of it. What we're talking about today is game design in general and reasons why you make certain decisions. I get a sense that this game was an experiment. Something specifically about this game is that it feels like an experiment because it's what feels like a clone of another game, but with other elements added. This is called Lone Tower, and it's a tower defense idle game, or an incremental game, with some roguelite elements in it. The developer had said that he takes heavy inspiration from the game called The Tower, and I have played a little bit of that. That's this one right here. So the inspiration that this game takes from The Tower, from what I can tell, is the basic setup, right? You have the tower in the middle and then the upgrades at the bottom. You have the different pages of upgrades, which is attack, defense, and utility, I think. There's two different types of money in the game. There's gold coins and then there's gems. Gems are meant to upgrade things like permanent upgrades, and then the coins are meant for real-time usage. The other things it has are The other thing it has is card upgrades that you can trade in and out. So, because this is a clone, what makes it different from the tower? From what I could tell, it has 4 different things. It's visitors, experience points with random free upgrades, one-time use items, and weapons. So the question I want to ask is basically, what makes this game unique? Why play this game instead of others? Why would anyone care? The one criticism that I have about the gameplay elements that are introduced in this game has to do with the experience points and the way that you upgrade randomly throughout while you're playing. So like I said, the game plays pretty similar to the tower. Now the point of the game is to survive as many enemies as possible, right? Every time that your tower kills an enemy, you collect a coin. You get money from all these enemies that are attacking, and then you use that to upgrade your tower in any way that you see fit. The experience points, the way that they're done in here are a bit strange, because they're arbitrary. Experience points are left over from enemies after you kill them. I feel like this mechanic was inspired from Vampire Survivors. In Vampire Survivors, it's very different, because in Vampire Survivors, you have a say in how many enemies that you kill. Vampire Survivors, although it is an auto-shoot game, you do have control over your character. You know, if you were to not move, you wouldn't get very far. Depending on how you move and how you maneuver through the enemies, you get to kill a whole bunch of enemies. Depending on how many you kill, you get a bunch of experience points, and then that allows you to upgrade your weapons. It's a game loop that happens. With that being said, a lot of the times that we look at gameplay loops, we have to make sure that we're affecting the gameplay in a meaningful way. Now that could be very different depending on what type of game that you're making. But in this case, because we are taking inspiration from the tower, we look at the tower and we see what kind of gameplay loop it's creating. And the gameplay loop that it's creating, because it's mostly idle, is not so much about the player's ability to kill the enemies, but rather the player's ability to withstand damage by upgrading and choosing a strategy to go forth on. The more enemies that I survive from, the better upgrade stuff that I can get. In Lone Tower, however, we have these experience points that the enemies drop. The experience points have to add up to 100 before you level up. But the thing is, that's arbitrary, because the enemies only come in during certain waves. The player has no effect on how many enemies come in. If they did, then this would be different, right? If they could move the tower through a whole bunch of enemies and decide how many enemies they were going to kill, then that would make a little bit more sense for this mechanic. That'd be kind of a weird game. A tower survivor, the player can't affect the amount of enemies that they're attacking. It's always the same because the game decides, right? It's arbitrary at that point. You just have to wait until you have killed 100 and then you have upgraded. The reward is not meaningful because you haven't imbued any action on the game. The upgrade that you get for just simply surviving is more or less a bonus, and it doesn't really do a whole lot for you. And it feels like frosting on an already frosted cake. It's just extra fluff. However, the stuff that I think really does work in this game when we're comparing it to the tower is the other stuff that you added, which is the one-time use items, the weapons, and the decisions that you can make to let a visitor into your tower or not. I'm not sure why a visitor would want to visit a tower that's constantly being attacked. I do like the idea of the visitors. Basically, it's a gamble. Person coming in and either sabotaging you or giving you a bonus, and I think that's cool. The one-time use items I think are fantastic for this format because it adds another element of control and adds a little bit of an action element into a more strategy game. So I think that's pretty interesting. I think a lot of these elements would be interesting just by themselves, honestly. If I think about a game that's like the Lone Tower, except you only have items that you use or only can choose between different weapons. The other thing that I liked that you added was the weapons. Again, it added variety into the game. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how much variety of gameplay you'd want to introduce in an idle game. The game seems to be a mixture of a bunch of things. It seems like an experiment, and that's kind of where I wanted to take this conversation or this discussion or this pontification. I wanted to talk about that basically and exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve with the game. That's always the thing that I come back to as a game designer, as I always think about the decisions behind the mechanics, right? I know a lot of game developers like to just put in a whole lot of mechanics and features and see what happens with the world as they put these things in. If you're trying to make a game like Lone Tower and you're trying to see what makes for the best interest level or what makes for the best type of gameplay, then playtesting would be the thing to look into, and then iteration on top of that. That's one thing that a lot of people don't do, is iterate on their game, meaning like taking features out. And I know that's always a thing that's really hard to do, especially if you're a developer who's made a game for, an audience that has gripped onto it. There was one game that I actually gave feedback to, and in their Discord, some of their people disagreed with what I said and basically said that they should leave those features in because they grew so attached to them. And that's the kind of thing that you have to think about as a developer, is when you're iterating, what's the reason for your iteration and what is it that you're trying to achieve. As a designer, I come to everything with intention, and I try to think about why you would want to make certain decisions. As a game developer, it's really up to you at the end of the day to really understand whether or not you're trying to make the game for yourself, trying to make it for others, or if you're trying to make a certain experience, or if you're just experimenting, or if you're just trying things out. I have my coffee. I have not drank. No, I did drink it. I already drank it already. This is a pay what you want system. There's no payment required. This is just a service that I like to do, and if you think it's dope, then you can pay, and otherwise you don't have to. It doesn't matter. Thank you to GX Studio for giving me Lone Tower and letting me do this whole analysis. Again, if you have a game and you want to submit it to me, there is no payment necessary. You don't have to pay me. You can if you want to. That's totally cool. But there's a link in the description, or you can go to my website and you can submit a game, gamesover.coffee. This is Games Over Coffee Consulting. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys later.